So welcome to Really Awesome. And our topic is difficult people. No, it's not. It's difficult customers. No, it's not. It's difficult employees.
Oh, and how to manage them. Yes. I'm Brian Carver. That's Garrison Wynn.
Employees, how to manage them.
You're being difficult. Stop it.
Start the show. Brian, start the show.
I thought we started it.
Oh, is this the show? Wow, this is great.
You're being difficult. How am I going to manage this difficult person over there?
No, more difficult person.
No, you're difficult.
You're difficult. Wait a second. That's a difficult situation. If both people think that each other are difficult, isn't that kind of the issue? I mean, doesn't the boss...
That's marriage, right? I think that's marriage.
It is marriage.
Okay.
But doesn't the different show? Doesn't the show we're not going to do? That's the show we're not going to do.
Nope.
So if I'm the manager and I manage an employee, I mean, the truth is I think the employee is difficult. If that employee is difficult, that employee likely believes that me, the boss, is difficult. That's
True.
What's happening.
That's the case. Definitely. Yeah, it's a matter of perception. So A lot of times it's a compromise. It's a negotiation. Sometimes someone has to take the high road and just kind of accept the other person is going to be ridiculous. And sometimes it's the employee, sometimes it's the manager. You know?
And that doesn't sound like the high road. Sometimes you have to take the high road and say, you're ridiculous. That's the high road.
It is, because you're up, you're looking down, you're like, I'm above you, and I have to do this stuff, which I don't want to do. It's so noble, it's not fun.
So the high road means we're looking down at people.
That's what it means.
That doesn't sound like the high road at all.
Yeah, it's similar to highfalutin, which includes
I agree with I'm high. Well, maybe that's what the employee doesn't like about the boss is the boss is highfalutin.
Probably. Right.
Yeah. Now that we've gutted this topic,
I think we're done. I think we're
done. Show's over.
I think we nailed it. Yeah.
We're done.
So what's there's a lot of reasons people can be difficult. It's essentially they're not doing what you want them to do.
Right. But if you're going to start from the platform of why people are difficult, they don't feel valued. They feel like somehow you don't appreciate what they're doing enough. They think that what they're doing isn't valued enough. They believe you maybe specifically have a personal thing against them. I'm always surprised when you take a look at employee complaints, how it seems to be real personal, that my boss personally is trying to do this personal thing. And sometimes I'm sure that's true. Recently, I've been talking to some people who have said, people who are complaining about their boss, and what they've said is they believe that their boss has singled them out, and actually they're in trouble for things other employees actually do, and those other employees are not in trouble. So that's another thing about being singled out.
Is that one of those things where it's just like, I always get caught, or mom caught me, she didn't catch you? Or is it really that, they know that everyone's doing it, they're really just picking on this one person?
Yeah, mom, he's doing it too. Mom, he's doing it too. That's what it is. But now, does that mean that difficult employees are immature? Maybe. Does that mean that immaturity plays a role in this stuff? Maybe.
I think there's different personality types, right? Like, I mean, we've talked before a lot about sales managers and star salespeople, and sometimes your amazing performers are also kind of nuts, or they're just different. They have different needs or whatever. Sometimes your manager is a little more bureaucratic and a little bit more. I was just
getting ready to accuse you of stereotyping, but now I agree. I believe what I believe is Brian and I, by the way, accuse each other of stereotyping. I just feel that.
We're difficult.
The thing is that, I mean, my experience with really, really good top performers, high performers, when I mean high performers, people who have a phenomenal ability, a big talent, that may be difficult to work with. I just think being good at what you do and being difficult to work with go hand in hand. And I think that's why when you're dealing with difficult employees, the most important thing that you can do is take a look at the role that you play in their difficult behavior. At least take a look at that. Because if you're doing that, if someone knows that you're looking at your part in their behavior, even if you don't have a part, the fact you're looking at it may allow you to get some street cred, so to speak, and to look like you're being responsible. If that makes any sense?
Yeah, I think one of the toughest things is when, like, I don't know how many. I bet there's a lot of difficult salespeople or difficult marketers or maybe other professions and job titles that have, a lot more like eccentric people who are doing things that aren't fitting into policies. I don't know how many difficult accountants there are. They he's a superstar accountant. He wears weird hats. Why can't we get him to stop wearing the hat?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, no one's ever said, "Oh my God, what happened?" Well, an accountant came in here, screamed and yelled, and pulled a pistol. No one's ever said that.
An accountant.
Not a thing here.
He was taking long lunches. He had 3 girlfriends. What's up with these accountants?
Well, we know one. There's no accountant has 3 girlfriends, but continue.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just thinking about some of the CFO audiences I've talked to and how just really exciting they are.
Thank you, Brian. I'm probably getting ready to speak to that group now. I'll apologize for you.
Yeah.
No, but I listen. I was at a convention one time, and the entire convention was like 2,000 actuaries. I was the keynote speaker of actuaries. So yeah.
Yeah, thrilling. Yeah. So anyway, you've got situations where probably the toughest situation is when you feel like you need to give one person some different privileges than your other employees.
Right.
Even unequal pay is tough for people to accept these days. There's a big movement to, I think it's like actually technically illegal to require employees not to share how much they get paid.
Yeah. I've heard that.
So yeah, there's a lot of that. And I mean, there are some people who even believe, talking about difficulty, there are people who believe they deserve to be paid as much as everybody else, regardless of their performance or their value to the organization.
Right.
So a lot of different sources of difficulty.
There are people who believe they should be paid when they haven't left the house. They're not even, I should be paid. Yeah, your guy. But I mean, I read an article about someone who thought that they, even though they had run out of sick time or everything, they just couldn't go to work and felt that their contract they had for that job allowed them to be paid regardless of any other thing. So.
Yeah.
But I do think that the key, I think, here for a boss is to not personalize. I think that if there is a problem with your employee, you have to talk in terms of, what is it I can do for you to make this better? Is there a way that I can reward you, I guess, beyond money? Can I reward you in a way that works for you? Can I recognize you in a way that works for you? Yeah. I mean, or just kind of make sure that person's needs are actually being met, but to talk about that in a way that's just not too personal. I think the personalization is for a lot of people.
Well, I think it starts with, if you're really attuned to who your people are and what they need and their personality type and that kind of stuff, then you can start to try to give those things to them before you even have to have a conversation about it, which is better. It's certainly better than saying, well, you're pretty difficult, so I'm doing a lot of statements. I'm giving you a lot of compliments to make up for that. Right. It doesn't go over well.
Yeah, I mean, I think I had someone tell me years ago, they go, Garrison, I know how you are. That's not the worst way you could possibly start a conversation. As accurate as that may be, right?
Yeah, it's tough.
But I think you're right. I think it's the sit down. I think it's the not personalizing. I think it's all those things. But the other thing is, if we can talk about this, from just the ground up, about what makes someone actually difficult. And a lot of people just are afraid they're going to lose what they have or not get what they want. And that basic level of, I'm not going to get what I want from my work experience. Either my boss is not paying enough attention to me. And there's a lot of that about people who are saying my boss didn't talk to me, my boss didn't pay attention to me. I said this in another show. You saw exit interviews. And Lockheed Martin was one of them. But there's these companies that let us look at all these exit interviews. This is, 7 years ago. And in these exit interviews, like 79% of the people who left their job said, my boss doesn't talk to me. Nobody's talking to me. Nobody's getting back with me. I'm not getting any type of feedback. And I think that ignoring someone may be the number one way possibly to end up with a difficult person.
Yeah, that's for sure. I mean, I don't know. I mean, so to me, a lot of this comes back to just good communication habits and instincts and training. And I wish everyone was good at communication. Communication is one of those things like, marketing and driving that everybody thinks they're good at, even if they're not, which means, it's that other person. It's those people that are delusional.
Right.
No, we have to consider that maybe it's us. Maybe we need better communication skills. And I've worked on them for a long time because I felt like I was basically, Sleitzberger's type of person who's never diagnosed. So, people used to say to me like, well, what you're saying is fine, but your tone of voice is horrible. And
yeah, that's it. Right.
There's so many things that we can work on with communication.
I've been told like about word choice. Someone said, Garrison, it's your word choice. And I said, well, don't be a dirtbag. That's what I said. Which proved the point.
Dirtbag. I don't think I've heard somebody say dirtbag for a long time, for about 10 years.
Dirtbag is...
It's a remotely awesome word.
It's remotely awesome. I think that if there's one thing but for me, just a personal experience I've had as a manager leader, many years ago, I was a Fortune 500 leader. I had a big team at a corporate headquarters team of 71, and I had 38 locations around the country, and I was young, and I made a lot of mistakes. The biggest mistake I made was probably letting the top performers get away with too much and having the other people see that. I think that was a mistake. I think we had a meeting one time and we just invited like the top 5%. Biggest mistake we ever made. The other thing is that I think the mistake I made back then that kind of created some disgruntled stuff is I walked into a situation where people were unhappy with a previous leadership situation. And I kind of walked in almost because I was young and new and been promoted beyond my abilities. I kind of walked in there and tried to maintain an existing management structure when I should have walked in and said, hey, guess what? Forget all that. We're starting fresh. I didn't I kind of did that later on, but I did it at the beginning. So I think it's possible to, and I ended up with a one very difficult employee. She was quite difficult. And it turned out that she just thought I was an extension of an already proven unpopular regime. So,
Right. Yeah. I think in a lot of cases, whether you're the employee or you're the manager, the solution is in knowing what people really want and need. And because if you don't know that, you're certainly not going to be able to make things less difficult. It doesn't mean you're going to be able to give them everything that they need or that they want. It doesn't mean everything they want or need is reason. And I'm talking about manager or employee. It doesn't mean everything they want or need is reasonable either. Because there's a lot of things that we have to do to satisfy our goals at the business and to make everybody happy. So the one thing we haven't talked about is when do you fire a difficult employee, because you can't keep them all. And certainly in my experience, we've had kind of situations where there's kind of like a 3-strike rule. I had a guy, I guess I can't really share this actually. There are certain situations where, you try to help someone.
Still pending. The lawsuit is still pending.
Well, I just don't want to provide any information that other people that I work with might know. But there was someone who had one of those issues that you give them the resources they need for that kind of thing, and they didn't take advantage of it, and they didn't take advantage of it, 3 strikes and you're fired type of thing, because you have to protect your team. You can't let morale will go down if you let someone difficult just sort of fester there on the team and don't help everybody out.
I fired a top producer that we had. And I had to, because this person, as good as they were, really what they spent most of their time doing was getting other employees upset. They really spent a lot of time trying to fan the flames of a lot of stuff that didn't really exist much, just trying to someone who needed the drama. And they were just, this is the guy, was just addicted to the drama, to the point to where my boss said to me, I know this guy's really, really good, but who's this good? Who is so good that they're going to drag the next 4 people behind him down? Is he good enough for that? Is he good enough to sacrifice, other people's morale like that. So, and that's, and it was a very tough decision to make, and a decision that the overall corporate structure didn't necessarily agree with, because they just looked at the numbers.
Right.
Like, how do you get rid of this guy? I mean, it's impossible. So, well, why don't you hang out with him for a while and you'll see the progress.
That's right. Well, and you have to trust your middle managers, because they're closer to the situation.
Right.
So yeah, trying to think of some of these other people that I've seen get fired. Sometimes just people they prove that they're not able to do the basic competence things. I've worked with startups where their biggest problem actually is sometimes that they don't have policies in place. They haven't gotten to that point. They don't have an HR person. So just being clear with what's expected in a job.
Right.
Are you meeting that or not? Having regular meetings when they're not meeting it, so that there's a record of having given people warnings and all those kinds of things. But yep.
Yeah. I also think that being very genuine in your appreciation, when you are talking to someone, to make sure that when you are appreciating them, that they believe that you are really genuine. I've seen situations where people maybe someone's not used to getting praise. Maybe they're excelling in this job, but in their life, no one has really talked to them about how good they were doing. And for them not to think that your praise is genuine, I think it's a big issue. I've had an employee like that where no one ever praised them. They didn't understand what it was. And I've had to say, look, I'm not just sitting here blowing smoke. You are actually this good at this job. I'm letting you know that, and we're grateful that you are. How can we help you to continue to be better? To make sure they know this genuine. I think that's
I'm really grateful for your collar. Like the fact that you have, an extra button unbuttoned.
What?
Like you're really good at dressing, and I'm not blowing smoke. I want you to know that it's good for the whole show.
Well, this collar stands up on its own. Like, it has its own agenda. It is able to stand on its own. So if I flop it, it still stands. A lot of collars give up.
That's a superstar.
Look at this. Look at this. There you go. Screw it. I'm going down. Just go down. But this collar doesn't do that. This collar stands up in the face of adversity.
Yeah. Well, that is definitely more detail than we needed. So
yeah, that's more than you need to know. But the only way to get a collar to stand up on its own is you got to pay for it. That just doesn't happen by itself. Your collar wants to stand up. You can tell it's got ambition.
It's trying.
It's trying to do that. Yeah. So.
So anyway, we should do a show about how to stay on topic.
No, we've gotten feedback, and it's like, you guys are really great, and you're talking about something interesting, you're talking about something funny, and then all of a sudden you're talking about something, and we don't even know what that thing is. So, So anyway, but I think another thing is that are you willing to get face to face with the employee to even have these conversations? I think a lot of leaders are afraid to do a real live sit down and talk about what's important, and to let the employee talk. Let them talk. What comes out of somebody's mouth just means a lot more to them than what comes out of your mouth. People have to have a chance to talk, and even if they're saying something bad or negative, they've got to have a chance to talk. Employees that don't have an outlet have a problem.
And that goes back to communication, training and practice. I mean, I can certainly understand if you haven't had a lot of experience and you're afraid they might go into something you're not really sure how to deal with. Right. You got to have some strategies like, okay, that's great feedback. Let me think about that, and we'll have another meeting, and I'll give you some feedback. But you don't have to feel on the spot right then. Is one strategy.
I agree. But also, I'd like to talk to you about this. Here's the elephant in the room, or the thing that nobody wants to talk about. I never liked that somebody put the expressions elephant. If there was an elephant in my room, I would know it, because it's huge. But we're not talking about the elephant in the room. Believe me, if there was one in the room, it would be the total topic of the show.
Yeah.
My point is this. Sometimes we don't talk about this because we can't do it very well. We can do it on this show. But sometimes certain situations come down to, good old-fashioned mental illness. And, I've seen it. I've dealt with it. And by mental illness, these days we can say that they're bipolar or whatever it is. But there are people who have good days and bad days. There are also people who have good days and absolute just train wreck disaster.
Yeah.
Followed by a good day, followed by a train wreck, followed by a good day, followed by a train wreck. And that's the deal. And you get to that realm, I've seen it, I've dealt with it.
Yeah.
It's one of those situations to where maybe there isn't a rule book for that. Maybe we are not allowed to talk about that in corporate America. Maybe we have to give everyone the benefit of the doubt. But I could line up a room full of industrial psychologists, psychiatrists, psychotherapists, and they would all go, that is a thing.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, it's definitely a thing. I mean, if you're talking about...
I mean, it's a thing that leaders are probably faced with that we don't really know what we can actually do. I mean, you can't terminate somebody for being mentally ill, not unless you have a lot of lawyers. That's not an easy thing to do.
That I don't have a lot of familiarity with. I mean, if their behavior is out of line with policy, you know what I mean? I mean, like it's, I mean, people have issues and some people have more than others. And if they're not, you know, medicated properly or, you know, whatever, and certain, what I do know is there are certain mental disorders where people tend to not stay on their medication.
Right.
And when you have that kind of situation,
it's a little bit different. That's different because if they're actually on medication, then you've got a leg to stand on. There are people who are on medication, or they're on medication and what they have is beyond that. They're just people. I mean, I've seen a situation where an employee who did a great job and then would get upset in 3 or 4 days and try to go undo what they did. They would try to unravel their own work. And that is what, I mean, that's, you know, that's when someone is doing that, you know.
Well, again, I think the way to handle that, and I'm no expert on this part of HR, but if you have clear, you know, definition of what the job entails and what they're measured with in terms of progress and adequate performance versus amazing, if they're not meeting these basic job requirements, you know, because they're undoing their good work or whatever it is, if you don't have ways to measure that, you really should. Like, it could be as simple as how many projects they've completed. And those, you know, if a completed project is undone, it's no longer completed. Like, you know, having reviews with those people and then, okay,
I agree.
You're not a fit because you're not fulfilling the job requirements. Doesn't matter why, really, right?
Right. I agree. I think that what's worked for me in situations, I've just really had a couple of situations where I had something like this, and one of which my employee was managing that person, and I had to kind of step in. But, you know, if you're willing, and that is to go in and take some responsibility. So I saw it work, and then years later I asked someone who was a psychiatrist, is this a thing? And it is a thing. So if I'm dealing with someone who is unreasonably upset or is trying to undo good work they've done, and I go in and say, hey, what can we do, or what can I do to make this better? And say, hey, if there's something that we've done or some situation we've created that has created a situation for you, let us know it as we can correct it. What's interesting is the result was different than I thought it would be, but it worked. When I said that, they actually got mad, huffed and puffed and walked out, but they no longer continued the behavior.
Oh, just calling them on it, saying, I see that you're doing this.
Well, just going in and saying, hey, if it's something
being willing to,
when they were really maybe somehow looking to stir trouble.
Yeah. And
the minute that you became accountable, they just moved on.
Yeah, because they couldn't blame you for it anymore because you gave them it. Yeah.
So that's something I did. I did that kind of accidentally, and then found out afterwards that you ought to do that. So that was it's called the management accident.
Well, management is endlessly interesting, that's for sure. People are
endlessly difficult.
That's your philosophy.
Has anyone ever called you? Have you ever had a boss tell you were difficult?
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah. When I worked at that ad agency in Myrtle Beach, you know, I was learning a lot of lessons too, though. I was learning, like, because I was dealing with, like, hey, you're in charge of your department.
right.
but you're not in charge of the whole company. And that was, so it's like, I was like, but we should go this direction, or this, our money, the revenue's coming here, or this, or whatever. It's like, just accepting that, your prescription for where the business should go based on what you're seeing isn't up to you.
Because I had that because I was so excited. I got in this junior VP position. And after the first meeting, my boss, who was the head of marketing, told me, you know what, Garrison, is called a junior VP. Don't talk so much.
That's right.
It's called a junior VP. All right. So
well, I've also at that job, I learned a lot of lessons at that job. I let my stand-up comedy, when you do too much stand-up comedy,
oh yeah,
you just start getting used to saying whatever you think is going to be funny. And I did that a few times inappropriately. And it wasn't even. It was just like, and it was usually just making the boss look bad, which I shouldn't.
Right.
But
it's weird you said that because I was literally doing stand up. I was doing some traveling. I had a job, was kind of a sales job, and so I was trying to do both at the same time. And I said some things in meetings that no one should say. I was just, hey, is that a bit? I said, I don't know, but I think it might be.
That's the weird thing, because when you get in that stand-up mode, you don't, that's the danger of doing too much stand-up, is that like comedians tend to just throw out ideas with each other, and they understand it's just hypothetical funny stuff. Right. The rest of the world doesn't think that way. They're like, you stand behind your words. Every single word you say.
Word association. I made up a word, and the word was boss hole. So that was a word I made up. It did not go over well.
That's a good one.
You can't say boss hole. So
yeah. Well,
but I think we're going to wrap things up finally. I think that if you are a leader, you're likely to have a difficult employee, and if you are dealing with difficult employees, you do have to deal with it. And I think the first step is to sit them down and find out, what can we do for you? Is there something you need that you're not being provided? What is it? How can we reward you? How can we deal with you in a way that works best for you? I know some people don't want to do that, but I think that in a lot of cases, you can eliminate the problem before it gets worse.
That's right. That's right. Make sure you have that structure in place for job requirements and, having meetings with people about their progress and warning them if there are issues. And work on your communication skills. It's
exactly right.
It's tough. It's strange. I just don't think anybody, including me, really wants to work on their communication skills.
Right.
But over time, you tend to learn it, and the more you've read about it or watched videos about it, the more you pick up in your own experience, the faster you're going to learn that stuff. So,
well, we can end on this note if you want to about communication skills, because Brian, that's an extremely important point, because if you don't have those kinds of skills, it's very difficult to be an influential leader. So I looked at my database one time, and I've done a lot of speaking engagements over the years, lots and lots, and for 25 years, and I there's a word I can search with in my CRM, and when I put communication in that search, basically 98% of my database came up. There wasn't a single event when I was taking notes about what was going on, when I was learning what the issues with the company were. Almost a single event didn't have the word communication in those notes.
Yeah.
That's how big a deal being able to communicate really is. And you're right, Brian, you're right. We try to discount it or say we don't need it or not want to talk about it. So
it just doesn't seem like a fun thing to learn about. And it's also hard to admit that we're not the best at it.
Well, hey, listen, if you're afraid to talk about communication, you've got a communication problem. There you go.
Yeah. All right. Well, that was how to deal with difficult people.
Yes.
Pretty much the exhausted. That's a PhD level course in it, and you don't need to know anything else. And this is remotely awesome with Brian Carter, Garrison Witt.
I like that. There's nothing else you should learn.
That's right. Yeah. You're pretty much, except for learning everything you can about communication in HR.
Correct.
But other than that, all right. That's the show.
That's the show. That is the show.